Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this webinar together with Lacework and Comrade. My name is Andy. I'm the co-founder of Comrade. And I want to give you a bit of a background of what Comrade does, what are the areas that we focus on and concentrate on, and why are we working together with Lacework. We are one of Lacework's first partners in Southeast Asia, and we think that it's an excellent security solution for all of our cloud customers across all the industries that we have been working on. But before we go and hand this presentation over to Brian from Lacework, I just want to give you a little background of us. Comrade was established in 2014, and about 3-4 years ago, we were majority acquired by ST Telemedia. There's two reasons why I want to bring this up. Number one, we are part of a larger group of companies, which means that if we are running out of some skills, we can then tap into the other sister companies that we have in the portfolio. For instance, we have Second Watch in the US, which is one of the very first AWS MSPs from Washington, Seattle, from 2010. And they have about 300-400 consultants in North America. So if you have customers where we need to collaborate, for instance, in the Americas, we can easily work together with Second Watch. The other reason why I wanted to bring this up, that Comrade is mainly focused on migrations and managed services. But if there are skills required, for instance, in the analytical space or contact center space or somewhere else, we are also able to find talent as part of the group companies as well and bring those services to you in Singapore and beyond in Southeast Asia. Looking a little bit more about Comrade. So I mentioned we established the company in 2014. We partnered up with AWS back then. In 2015, we also, sorry about the background noise, we also partnered up with Alibaba Cloud. We had some customers in mainland China who needed some workloads to be hosted there. In 2016, we became Google Cloud Partner. In 2017, Microsoft Azure Partner. In 2018, Oracle Cloud Partner. 2018, VMware on AWS Partner, and 2020 also Huawei Cloud Partner. And this year in 2022, we have also partnered up with Tencent Cloud. Now, that's a lot of cloud for a small company like us with about 100 consultants or so, but we don't do everything in the cloud space. We focus mainly on migrations and managed services. Managed services for us means three things. Number one, infrastructure managed services. Number two, infrastructure security managed services. And number three, also SAP technical managed services, what we provide for our customers. So I talked about analytical workloads in the beginning, for instance, or machine learning or AI. Those are not areas that we have been typically focused on. We help our customers to migrate from an on-premise data center, for instance, onto a cloud platform, and then provide our customers with 24/7 managed services support. The other unique thing about Comrade as a born in the cloud company is the fact that we are on the highest partnership level with AWS, with Google, and with Microsoft as well. We have experienced consultants across all of those three different cloud platforms, and that makes us unique in the Southeast Asian market in the sense that there aren't many companies like us who are able to work with, regardless of the cloud platform, on the highest partnership level with all of them. In 2019, we also attained ISO 27001 certification. With a number of the cloud platform companies, we have been certified by third-party auditors according to their competencies or specialization. So for instance, with AWS, we have the FSI specialization, MSP specialization, SAP specialization. With Google, we have infrastructure and migration specialization, and also with Microsoft, we have the advanced Windows desktop specialization. So we have been spending a lot of time and effort to making sure that when we help our customers to migrate onto a cloud platform, we are providing them with the right kind of expertise and skills in those projects. Moving on, we are present in all of Southeast Asia. So we have our headquarters in Singapore, followed by Indonesia that we set up in 2016. We set up an office in KL in 2018, and we also have people in Bangalore, in India, and elsewhere. We have been working with customers in the Philippines, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Thailand, Myanmar, Qatar, Maldives, and outside of this map, we have also done projects in Spain, Germany, US, and elsewhere in the world. In Australia, we have a setup for us to be able to sell solutions on the Amazon marketplace, for instance, as well. So regardless where you're coming from today, I believe that we will have the right people, right skills, and right presence to make sure that we can help you to migrate onto a cloud platform of your choice. In that 8 years that we have been in existence, we have about 500 customers across all kinds of different industries. We have been working with Daimler, for instance, in the automotive sector. We have been working with Sinarmas in Indonesia in the mining sector. We have been working with IETA in the aerospace sector. We have been working with Muji here in Singapore. When it comes to retail, we have been working with Renus Logistics worldwide when it comes to the logistics industries, but we have also been working with the Singapore government, including ministries, statutory boards, non-profit organizations, educational institutions such as polytechnics and universities, and we have been working with even with religious organizations, gaming companies, and airlines. Again, my apologies for the background noise that you're hearing. Besides of having those cloud platform partnerships, we have been partnering up with ISVs such as Acronis for backup. We have been working with Dynatrace and New Relic for application performance management. We have been working with security companies like CyberArk and CrowdStrike and Trend Micro in the past. And we are very much starting to see a lot of demand for infrastructure automation and security. And that's where we have been partnering up with HashiCorp. But for today's topic, we recently partnered up with Lacework, and the reason we partner up with Lacework is the fact that Lacework is bringing something very, very unique to the table. And you will be seeing and hearing from Ryan in the next presentation how Lacework is different from all the other security solutions that are out there. You do not need to configure it. It's almost ready out of the box. And what the system does, it learns your behavior on the cloud. And if there's something that happens out of band, subsequently, the system is able to recognize and highlight that to you, not just in terms of alerts, but in terms of the information flows that you will have in your system. And that will give you a much better security experience and much better compliance experience than you probably might be used to looking at any of the other security solutions that are out there. In terms of Cloud Comrade services, we do all the way from discovery to planning to design to building, deploying, and managing. So we help our customers to understand what they currently have on premise. Then we might go and design a landing zone for them. Then we start the build and the migration activities. There's a lot of re-platforming that happens in many of our customers. And we can then bring those customers, for example, onto a Kubernetes cluster or a serverless architecture or cloud native database. And then once the customer has landed there in the landing zone, then we can also manage them on a 24/7 basis. Might it be in infrastructure, might be in security, or might be with the SAP technical workloads. Moving on, a lot of our customers, when we have migrated them across, they want to start modernizing their infrastructure. It starts with application portfolio discovery and assessment. We talked about building the landing zone. A lot of our customers then want to have those infrastructure deployed as a code. And many customers are telling us these days that they want to re-platform into containers. They might want to ensure that the application performance management is being done correctly. There might be some re-platforming that happens. For instance, companies, especially in the FSI space, are using a lot of cloud virtual desktops. And many of our customers are starting to see the benefit of re-platforming their databases into cloud native databases. Security always comes as part of all of our projects. So customers are talking about container security, continuous cloud security compliance monitoring, next generation firewalls on cloud, and managed services for those security solutions. So Ryan is going to do a deep dive how Lacework can cover many of those aspects. But before we get there, just wanted to highlight all the various ways that we are protecting our customers' workloads, be it on the identity and access management side, application and data protection side, network side, or threat protection side, or security management side. It might be in terms of a SOC that we provide for our customers. It might be VAPT that we provide for our customers, data protection services, or more generic from a governance perspective, also risk management. So those are all of the pillars that we focus on when we talk about implementing cloud security for our customers and also providing cloud managed services for security for our customers. So that's pretty much the short company introduction I wanted to do to Cloud Comrade. And with that one, I wanted to hand it over to Ryan. Ryan, without further ado, please over to you.
From the very first thing, very first start. So let me just share my screen. Give me 2 moments. Okay. And I'm assuming that's up on everyone's screen. So hi, everybody. My name is Ryan Johnson. I am the Director of Field Engineering for Lacework here in the APAC region. And today we're going to talk about cloud security automation, really on the compliance side. And we're going to be focusing on considerations for organizations as they grow, whether early stage or startup and the like. Before we jump in, I think I'm going to give you a super brief introduction to Lacework, just to give a little bit more color to the introduction from Andy. Look, at Lacework, we realized that cloud security is a data complexity problem. And that's going to be a theme you're going to hear quite a bit throughout my session today. So that's why we created a platform that makes sense of that data and automates rule writing to establish a baseline of what looks normal in your environment. We're a cloud security platform that delivers automated security and compliance across multi-cloud environments, workloads, containers, and Kubernetes, all in a single platform. Look, and we've helped some of the most innovative companies that no doubt you've all heard of, such as Snowflake, Airbnb, Box. We've helped them accelerate their development, consolidate cloud security tools, and reduce costs. But yeah, it's really about effectively using machine learning to give you real context around your data to get your cloud security right. But with that, today's focus is on compliance. I'm going to be taking you through some of the lessons that we've learned, that we've learned through my time at Lacework and also time previously, how a little bit more color on those problems and how you can address them, and how Lacework can help you with that. And so with that, this button here, there we go. Let's start with the agenda. Compliance. Why does it matter? What are some of the challenges with them? What are the requirements themselves? And what are some of the solutions that we can put in place in order to meet those challenges? A little bit about myself. So as I said, I'm the director. I coordinate the field engineering function here for Lacework. I've been on board for a better part of a year. Prior to that, I was at an organization called Sumo, another software as a service provider who transitioned from startup to a publicly traded company. I was there for 6 years. And prior to that, I was at a Splunk professional services provider. Now, the reason I mentioned both Splunk and Sumo is just to give you a bit of color that I've got a passion for data and making that data usable and useful for organizations and analysts to solve real problems. And one of the problems that we've seen, that I've observed and helped a lot of organizations with over that time, all the way from, early stage startup through to mature organizations, is compliance, and adhering to best practices to, set yourselves in good stead to protect yourselves and your customers. So let's get into it. We've got about 30 minutes. We do want questions. So please, by all means, throw your questions into the chat panel. And we'll get to them right at the end. So back to the agenda. Well, this is pretty straightforward. Why does it matter? Why does compliance matter? We incur costs in tackling compliance. So, and it's generally not a part of your company's core business. So why do we do it? Where are the challenges that we have? Specifically, what are the challenges we have? Specifically, challenges that are unique to the cloud. What are the requirements? And what do we need to do to solve and address these? And then finally, what do we need to have in terms of an overall solution to obtain, maintain, and prove that we have a handle on compliance and security in the cloud? So compliance and audit, what are these? And why are these things important? There's two concepts I'm going to address briefly. When we talk about compliance, we're stating that you follow a set of procedures and best practices. It's pretty black and white. It's a set of things that are either true or false about your organization, your environment, and the way you operate. That's a compliance control or a compliance protocol. An audit is about proving that you do what you say you do. So when you set out to be a compliant organization, you make a commitment to adhere to these controls or protocols, typically in an ongoing fashion. An audit is when someone, either internal or external, comes in and says, okay, well, let's prove where we're at, either against the initial commitment that you've made or from where you were last time. And it's also worth touching on how compliance differs from security. And this is important because these two are often conflated. A lot of the time we talk about them in the same conversation, but they are a little bit different, even though they do overlap quite significantly. When we talk about compliance, we're talking about ensuring that you are in policy with one or more regulatory compliance frameworks. Hopefully we've all heard, PCI, SOC 2, GDPR, right? These are the big ones that we often see that are regulated by the industry. And given the audience today, I'm also guessing that the PDPA and MTCS are also familiar to you. Compliance is based around the idea of managing risks by having process and procedures in place that guide us to prevent and resolve incidents involving sensitive customer data. They typically have strict reporting and penalty requirements. And we've probably all heard like crazy, dollar figures that people have been hit with, or organizations have been hit with GDPR fines, as well as things like CCPA, which is another one you may or may not be familiar with, and HIPAA, which is that you may know as a US healthcare compliance framework. The takeaway is there can be a real cost to breaching compliance with these particular protocols. So when we're talking about these frameworks, we're typically talking about a SOC 2, a PCI. I've also got NIST up here, which is a US federal framework. But what we're talking about is understanding how we take a control. I mean, in the first, one at the top there, the SOC 2, we say that we need to restrict access to company resources through access control software and rule sets. Sounds pretty dry. Or we can put it in another way, in PCI language, and say we need to limit access to system components and cardholder data to only those individuals whose job requires such access. Now, that's the control you must address with PCI, but how you actually meet that control in your environment can vary wildly. That's because every organization and their environments, their applications, their architectures are all different. For example, there might be many ways that you and your organization might store credit card data, which is going to be different ways to your competitors or someone else in the market, or different ways to store them or access the systems that do store them. And we're going to come back to that in a moment. But at the top here, you see there, we have an example of a single and prescriptive CIS control for AWS that is checking for and saying that, ensure your credentials, your AWS credentials that have been unused for 90 days or greater are disabled. Or, in plain language, if you're not using the system, then your job likely doesn't require you to have that access to that system. Therefore, we should remove that access. And this is a best practice that we should adhere to. So when we're talking about a soft control, we're typically talking about a SOC 2 or a PCI, the controls that fall under those frameworks. A hard control is going to be typically something like your CIS benchmarks. These are industry standard, they're widely considered best practice, and they're recognized by the various regulatory bodies in addressing those requirements, such as the CIS control at the top meets the requirements of the frameworks below in the context of AWS. There are a few other frameworks like the CIS out there, but they're really just different versions of the same thing. Like, it's recommendations: don't turn on telnet, SSH should not have root access, have access control policies. These permissions should be set on files, all that kind of hard control componentry. So we've talked about the structure of it. Let's get a bit more exciting. We've talked about soft and hard controls. We're going to talk about the costs of these things. Now, I mentioned before HIPAA, and GDPR, and PCI, and they all have fines attached associated with them for non-compliance. They all have components that if you fail, or particularly if you continue to fail in your job as a custodian of that data, you can get a fine. And those fines can vary. If you're a small customer who's low on the PCI structure, where maybe you haven't been audited yet, or maybe you're self-attesting to PCI requirements, that could be pretty small. But as you grow into larger companies, things change. Now, here are some examples of some well-known large organizations that have had loss of trust. You can run into the situation where all of a sudden consumers get more nervous about giving you their data. You'll have a harder time getting new customers, especially in a competitive or a commodity market. Harder time convincing either companies or consumers to trust you. And to be clear about the cost of breach in these situations, back in 2014, there was a company called Codespaces that went out of business. Somebody compromised their AWS environment, and they got such a high degree of control in their AWS environment that when Codespaces tried to kick the attacker out, the attacker literally destroyed all of their backups, all their code, everything. They had no recovery plan, outside of AWS, and they went out of business. So it's a bit of a worst case scenario. But when we think about the segment as a whole, the small to medium business, the hyper growth segment, we find that the data from the Verizon data breach report, which hopefully some of you might have seen, it shows that 60% of these breaches result in outage of your system and of your services. If you're just getting started up, if you're trying to get things up and running, these outages are really detrimental to the trust and the operational efficiencies of your teams. And 93% of these breaches are financially motivated. Look, if we don't have a good recovery plan or a way to resolve this issue, if and when it shows up, we have a really high chance that this results in an outage and a potential chance that the company can go out of business. That everything we've done has been for nothing, and because we can't reclaim control of our environments quickly enough. That was the doom and gloom. Let's keep going. That was the worst case scenario. But let's talk about how we address this. One of the first things we're going to talk about is the audit. It sounds like a very exciting thing to do. But when we think about the audit process, a lot of time we're really just talking about things like CSPM side of things, the cloud security posture management thing, which establishes what is the state of my environment. Are S3 buckets open or closed? Do we have security groups open to the world? If we're in Azure, what do those resource groups and their configurations look like? What do our network configurations look like? Does it meet what we said they were supposed to be in terms of access control and our policies around it? There are three things we talk about. Firstly, we want to establish the integrity of the system. This is the key component and ensures we know what is actually happening in our environment. That's why a lot of the CIS controls exist, as to say, if I have these in place, then I can be reasonably confident that an attacker is not in my environment causing me problems. I can see all my users, I understand who they are, I can see the security groups, I can see the systems, all the stuff that's important that just establishes a baseline of what normal looks like, the integrity of your system. The second piece is to validate the processes. The process, you might have a process that says we will remove employees after they have left the company from our access control systems. That's what the process says. However, unless we have a lot of automation in place, it's typically a manual process. Prior to my being in professional services at Splunk, I was a network administrator, and there'd be a few times where I'd get a tap on the shoulder from a manager saying, be prepared, we have to talk to an employee, we have to shut down their access, be prepared to shut down their access in about 30 minutes time. It's not a fun day, but it is an important job. It's critical to make sure this happens. If somebody leaves the company, we need to make sure we disable their access. So an audit is going to help us prove that, yes, we cleaned up the systems after the users left. And the last thing is to establish positive control, combining those processes, establishing the controls and validating we're doing what's required. By establishing positive control, we can say, I know what's running in production. I can see that. I can see and understand it. I know the state of those resources and I know how they're built. So in the event of an audit, any questions that arise can be answered quickly and quite easily. All right, so that's what we want to solve for an audit. But the fact is it's challenging, it's complex. There are a lot of things that happen as we go through all this stuff. And I think there's a couple of things that I'm quite excited to be talking to you about today. Because a lot of the times, particularly as growth companies, a lot of times we talk to enterprises who have a bunch of tech debt or what I'm trying to dub sec debt, security debt, stuff that is way in the backlog that everyone knows needs fixing, but they just haven't got around to it yet. But hopefully everyone on this call today understands it when I say we go fast in the cloud. Things are very fast. and they're very complicated because things happen so quickly. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of resources and services that we can leverage to accomplish our goals as a business. But along with that, there are some very specific threats that just simply did not exist in the data center that do in the cloud. So these are the things that we're going to talk about. These are the things that you all face directly as startups and growth companies that influence how you build your businesses or that you're encountering as you do. So let's scratch on that a bit. First things first, speed of the cloud. People can spin up entire environments today in minutes, if not seconds. With the use of Terraform, they can spin up things like clusters, spin them down, do whatever you want. All you need is a credit card and an email address, and you have your own AWS environment. You have your own Azure environment. You've built your own GCP environment. This is probably how many of your developers or yourselves work today, right? Especially as, early on, we give somebody a credit card. We say, here you go. Go ahead and provision resources. Go make things happen. Go build the business. Get it up and running. Well, what this also means, though, is that the edge is accessible anywhere in the world. In the data center, you might have referred to as the perimeter. Unless I very specifically put rules in place and structure in place to say you have to be on a VPN to access this, or you have to be in these locations to access these resources, you're going to have a hard time controlling where people come in from. Even more so with the remote culture a lot of us now have. But it also makes it a lot easier for attackers. Today, if an attacker gets access to your access keys or your access tokens, they don't have to build servers anymore. They don't have to rack them or do those kind of things. They can just go ahead with your credentials, spin up a bunch of crypto miners in seconds, max out your AWS resources, give you a big AWS bill, and walk away with some crypto coin, free of charge in their eyes. And that's the easiest attack. That's the automated attack. That's the, hey, we found someone's accidentally checked in credentials attack. And that's not the, I got in and I saw you have cardholder data or sensitive information in your environment, and now I want to extort you kind of attack. This is the low-hanging fruit. So let's talk about complexity. Every cloud provider has hundreds of platform as a service, software as a service services. That sounds a bit repetitive. They're adding more every day. I stopped counting sometime back in 2020. I think there was about 300 odd AWS services, 200 Azure, and maybe 100 GCP. I can guarantee you there's probably more than that now. There's a resource for any problem you want to solve. So it's easy for us to build these environments and make them our own. It's so easy that we just go ahead and build them. It just happens. Even honestly, in the Lacework demo lab, we've got systems that have been running for weeks that probably aren't in use because we just forgot to decommission them. We haven't set up a Reaper. We haven't set up a process to decommission those, because that is not what the business needs right now. The business needs us to go fast, to make things happen. We need to innovate. We need to go quickly. As we adopt more services and we adopt serverless functions as well as platform as a service services, we run into a lot more complexity. Every time we add an abstraction layer, we're adding at least a layer of complexity to the system, and it makes it harder for us to understand what's actually happening unless we start to dive deep. And by adding that complexity, we're also reducing the visibility we have into these systems. If you've just got a host and you're just running services on it, it's pretty easy for you to understand what's going on. But the moment you start adding containers, the moment you start going serverless or adopting Fargate, you're adding more complexity, and it's harder to get at that data. I'm curious to know how many of you are playing with multi-cloud today, particularly as a startup or a growth organization. The moment you go multi-cloud, you've got two different control planes. You've got two different ways to build things. All of a sudden, it gets complex. There's a theme here. Even if you're using tools that automate and aggregate like Terraform and Pulumi, all of a sudden you have some complexity to go ahead and manage, and a bunch of other problems to solve. That includes hiring people with disparate skill sets to manage in each of these environments. Like, that's a different type of complexity, although it's probably better referred to as a headache. On the other hand, multi-cloud solutions help you prevent that kind of code space type situation where all your stuff is sitting in one AWS account or one basket, where an attacker is able to literally take you out of business. One of the biggest things that I've seen a lot, and I think really keeps security teams up at night, and I've seen this a lot because I've been guilty of it, is the proof of concept to production migration. Curious to know how many of you have been in the situation where you're like, okay, we're going to go prove this thing out. We're going to build this architecture. We're going to see if this thing works. And it does. And then all of a sudden it's close enough to production that you just go, hey, let's just turn it on. Let's just make it live. Let's productionize it. But if you do it that way, you definitely have not gone through the normal process of reviewing the architecture, understanding security implications, where we build this thing out from, what risk we might have as a result of this architecture. How do we solve for that? Now we've got a problem to solve with customer data, and you may have, to use the analogy, painted yourself into a corner where, any kind of way of addressing that issue could potentially take down your environment and impact customer perception. In a similar vein, the classic lift and shift problem, we're going to go, okay, I have an existing system. How do I transplant that to the cloud? What do I need to re-architect for it? What differences exist in the cloud compared to what exists in my data center? And lastly, I think we're going to see a lot more hybrid deployments overall. One of the things that I think we're going to run into is, as you move that steady state back in, where you don't need that kind of scalability that the cloud offers, a lot of that might come back into data centers, where we might see a lower operating cost than compared to your cloud providers. But fundamentally, these are the kind of things we run into in the cloud. These things create individual and disparate security concerns for us that are very different from how we might have operated before, and with the speed of the cloud are real problems for us to solve overall. And so the specific threats we run into here is our control plane is always exposed. From my computer, I have access to the APIs of Amazon, Azure, GCP. And as long as I have valid credentials, I can access a customer environment or any customer's environment, so long as I have those credentials, and make things happen. Access sprawl is unprecedented. How many of your teams have checked AWS credentials into GitHub, either in a private repository, it's bad, or even worse, in a public one? If you're going to open source a project that you haven't had public before, did you go back through and sanitize these? Look, we've seen this where all of a sudden a repository goes public. It might not have current credentials in it, but back in its history, it did, and somebody found them. Now, this problem is such that Amazon and GitHub actually do crawl these environments for it. They're trying to address this on our behalf. They don't have to, but they do. And we also have automated attacks. We're on the internet. Everything can be automated. We're going to get ports scanned all day. IAM attacks, brute force, phishing attacks. One of the key ones we see in startups, and I've seen this personally. I've been phished here at Lacework, and I've seen it happen at Sumo, and also with a company near Sumo, is the impersonation of a CEO or an executive of some sort. Send an email like, hey, it's your CEO, I need you to send me over a gift card, which is weird at the best of times, unless you're paid in gift cards. Or I need you to give me access to this thing. If you or your organizations don't have access to the executive or the right training, it's an easy phishing attack to fall for. I mentioned before that there was an example, as Sumo was on a path to IPO, we're about a year out, and a company just up the road, another tech, Silicon Valley startup, they were phished. They just had a funding round, making them a very big target, and they were hit with $80 million. So going public, phishing is real. And you see the email say, please don't do this again. And you mean, wait, this actually happens? It does. We talked about the complexity of microservices. I want you to really understand that the more complex we make the architecture, the harder it is to get visibility into what's happening and to understand whether something bad is going on. And lastly, because everything is built with microservices and API oriented, they're now interconnected and interdependent. We can't take down one without potentially or unknowingly risking a whole bunch of other things as well. Okay, deep breath. With all that, let's take a segue over into the world of DevSecOps or SecDevOps or OpsDevSec. One of those sounds right to me, the other two sound wrong, but it's a personal thing. Whatever floats your boat, so to speak. You can put this in whatever order you want, put yourself at the front. That's what I often say do. There's no right or wrong answer here. But however you want to think about it, one of the things I want you to take away is this. I want you to think about the tenets of it. Obviously, I refer to it as DevSecOps. There are two things I think are really critical. Number one, security in the pipeline. We have to get ahead of things We have to shift things left. This is something I hope everyone here is aware of, the whole shift left paradigm. We have to make decisions about what we can and we can't solve for in the pipeline. And as a part of that, we want to embed security mindset in our developers. We want to embed the security skills in the developer and operational teams. If we wait to have a security conversation or to rectify something once we're in production, that is way too late. You're introducing vulnerabilities into your environment. And so security for the pipeline, we all know this, like static code analysis, scan for known vulnerabilities. Obviously with Log4j last year, that brought it to the front of everybody's mind. Test for risk before you deploy to production for known vulnerabilities. Obviously 0 day, different thing. The second part about it though, and we've talked about this, is a little about positive control a bit. When we implement secure CI/CD pipelines, we actually resolve a number of access management compliance requirements. So if we think about it this way, if the only way to affect production is to make a change of production of any sort is to check in code, well, where does access control go? If you don't have people logging into AWS, you don't need the access control constraints there. Or if you do, you might not have many of them. No, all your access control is in the code commit. Who can merge pull requests? That's where we focus on. That's where we do it. So, and we get to say, A, I know what change this person pushed because I know what the code is. And B, I can validate it was in fact that user who made that change and not otherwise. This is one of the things that I always find fascinating about supply chain attacks. You can clearly see that some customers, and I've seen this many times before, they've not spent the energy to secure their code pipelines, which is the way into their production. And this is the area that we can really focus on making things happen. The second is embedding security skills. I've met many developers in my time who do not understand the importance of password security requirements, who don't know why you would need to put in a thing to access a thing, or why a password reset token needs to be expiring, right? These things are not necessarily taught in computer science. They should be, but they aren't. So what we want to do is we want to bring the security skills and training to all engineers. Everybody should have a foundational level of security knowledge and awareness. I can tell you now, after that breach, the one during that time I was Sumo, after that customer got phished, the amount of security training that we had to do very, very quickly just went straight up. We also want to make sure that some of the security background is reviewing sensitive code, things about passwords, things about data storage, things about how do you manage sensitive data. This is a key component. Something I love about startups is, I'm yet to meet a startup where the security is the no police. That's predominantly an enterprise thing. That's the big end of town. But what we want to do is make an informed risk assessment and decision to ensure that the business goes forward. We've got a job to do. We're here to solve a problem. We're trying to build something that's going to last for decades, if not longer. We need to all work together as a team. And that's to say, look, I'm here to help review and make an informed risk decision, not to say, no, you can't do that because it violates some obscure compliance protocol or the way that I've interpreted some compliance protocol. So what we can do to solve the problem is, we need real-time data capture. We need to understand the complexity of our systems. We want to have a continuous audit and audit readiness process and procedure. And we want to go ahead and solve this through behavioral detection. What does normal look like? And then from there, you understand the actual risks in your environment. To solve for this data capture, we move fast. We move very fast. I'm sure many of you have got systems where your containers might live for minutes, if not seconds. On average, I think a container lives for half a day. And our control plane interactions, they're all through API. Again, attackers using compromised credentials to obtain new credentials with higher privileges. These are all things that are happening real time or near real time, and we need to capture this activity. And security needs to catch up with the speed of deployment. Look, if you're only auditing, or compliance needs to catch up with the speed of deployment, sorry. If we're only auditing once a week, we're missing half of those containers, at least half of those containers or more. If we focus on where the changes are introduced, we need to focus. That's where we need to focus. We're talking about a host of change on the system. If it's containers, it's in the registry. If you do it through automation, for both, it's in the pipeline. If we manage the code by infrastructure as code, we can trust but verify via audit. And we can say, hey, look, I know what Terraform said was going to be deployed. I know that I deployed it. And then I can audit that and validate that it is in fact the state I expected it to be in. Okay. So the last thing I talk about the complexity curve, it's just too hard to build rules. The number of services you build, the speed at which your organization is building them. If you require another company, the amount of energy, time and money that you need to spend in trying to put a square peg into the round hole, it's fundamentally incompatible. And you're going to waste a lot of time doing this, which is not your core business. Things like, the question you might ask yourself, how many apps need access to this port? What can I do about a temporary exception for a vulnerability? When is privilege escalation allowed? There are umpteen different scenarios that that in a rules-based world, you're expected to understand and preempt on top of all that complexity, which just simply is not feasible. So let's talk about the solution. We're on the home straight here. So how do we solve this problem? Multi-cloud visibility, positive control, continuous monitoring, and some root cause analysis. Multi-cloud. Look, I think a mindset is if it talks to another cloud or another environment, treat it as one. Work with tools and vendors, and obviously we're in the Lacework thing today, that will take on board all those environments and give you that consolidated view. If you're moving over to the cloud, are you moving everything all at once, or are you moving everything pieces individually? If possible, move it all together. Number two, positive control. We want positive control. Log all the things. Know what is happening in your environment. It's no longer enough to speculate what could happen in your environment through maybe once or twice daily scans. Where is your access control management? How do you secure it? But this is a screen grab of the Lacework polygraph. It's showing me that so someone has done something different. Someone's created a new user where perhaps they've never done so before, or they've created from a geography that they've never created it before, and we've brought this to your attention. So by focusing on what your normal looks like and telling you when something changes, you can be much more effective. And finally, continuous monitoring. Hopefully, I'm not telling you anything you don't know here. And this is absolutely key. If you try to build rules around this, you're going to go insane. It's not going to be possible. Pardon me. If you focus on what's abnormal and show me what changes, that's key. And I think I've got one more. Oh, and this is another example of the Lacework polygraph. And what I really like about this one, this acknowledges there might be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of interactions and processes and user commands and network comms and hosts and containers involved here. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. But this is an acknowledgement of the complexity of modern applications. But in everything you see here, in this specific example, there will be no events generated because nothing has changed in a meaningful way. And last slide, when something happens, how did it happen? When did it happen? What happened? And where? Let's be clear, in today's world, in an operational context, as one of my team members said, failure is, if you were to go back 10, 20 years, there'd be no expectation of failure. Today's DevOps edict is like fix fast, fail fast. Today, I'm finding that the general mindset around security is not a matter of if I'm breached, it's going to be when. And I think some acknowledgement of that's going to help. And this kind of having this kind of context and to get you to that outcome quicker is absolutely key. And with that, hopefully that has been of some use and been useful for the team. I'd like to turn it back to you all for any questions, and I will check the chat now. So there's a question: Can Cloud Comrade provide? Can Cloud Comrade provide risk assessment or controls checks for cloud? I think Cloud Comrade is probably in the best position to answer that one.
Thanks, Ryan. Good question. So yes, absolutely, we do that for a lot of our customers to get started and see what is the security posture. We can start that with one cloud platform in mind, or if our customers have multiple different cloud platforms that they're using, we can do that also for wide variety of different platforms. So, and that's typically a relatively straightforward, simple thing to do. Takes perhaps a couple of days for us to come back with a report. And I think that then starts as it's a good starting point for organizations to then consider what kind of a cloud security they might want to be implementing moving forward. Thank you for the question.
Great. How do we protect against malware attacks in platform as a service environments, such as a malicious file upload by a malicious user? Well, Lacework, we address this in two prongs. We through our agent-based monitoring, through matching through file integrity monitoring on your hosts and in your environments, we can flag known malicious activity. But then again, we also baseline what normal looks like. So in the event that those files are executed, we know what normal looks like in that environment, as well as and flagging things that are abnormal. In platforms as a service, I'd be keen to understand the requirement a little bit further there. If you can share any more color. And Callista, while that's coming through, I think there was a question. Will the recording be shared after the webinar?
Yes, we will be emailing the recording to you guys after the webinar.
Great, thank you. Pardon me. So question from Matthew. Chonkia, sorry if I've mispronounced your name there. Please feel free to give me any clarification there. I'll aim to address it. But in the meantime, how long does it take to operationalize a solution like this? Does it require specialist skills on the security IT team to run? So at Lacework, we are a software as a service. And we love all things automation. We love Terraform. We love CloudFormation. Very similar to our friends at our comrades at Cloud Comrade. A typical deployment, where we leverage Terraform, is orders of magnitude quicker than your traditional view of like rolling out a SIEM solution and the like. So I always hesitate to say, give a specific time purely because every customer's environment is different. But I generally in an afternoon has been my experience. So any consideration for countries, was it the Personal Data Protection Act compliance? Great, I'm glad you asked that question. So today, out of the box, natively in the platform, we have support for, I guess, the primary ones such as ISO 27001, NIST, SOC 2, PCI DSS, HIPAA, etc. But we will shortly be launching custom reporting via LQL, Lacework Query Language, which will allow you to, put different controls, hard controls, under different compliance frameworks to address these. Last year we had a scenario with working with a prospect in Vietnam, who actually sells in their software across Asia and is subject to many different compliance requirements. So it's something that is pending, and we're looking forward to announcing soon. Can we integrate with SIEM or alert channels? Absolutely. Thank you, Chaz. So SIEM, Security Information Event Management Tools, which is kind of my background. One of the great things about integrating with something like a Splunk or a Sumo Logic is that by Lacework can essentially pre-process a lot of that data and only send through the findings of that data. So giving you a better outcome while simultaneously recovering a lot of the capacity you might have otherwise paid for or accounted for in your investment in your SIEM solution, with a better outcome, in our opinion, because you're focusing on behavioral changes as opposed to an a flood of alerts that that are just going to sit in a backlog. And we integrate with things like Jira, Slack, Teams, all major cloud providers. PagerDuty, ServiceNow, etc. Now, for those who are still on the call, obviously there's a bit of a message from Callista. please, we'd love Lacework and Cloud Comrade would love for you to fill out the survey. Hopefully you found this useful for a t-shirt. That'd be great. Great.
Right.
And with that,
Any other questions? If no, then thank you very much for attending. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for the great presentation. And like Ryan, you mentioned that please fill out the survey so that we can ship you the t-shirt, but also if there is any follow-up that you need from our side, either from Cloud Comrade side or Lacework side, please indicate that in the survey itself or send an email to Callista, and then together with Callista, we can then organize follow-up sessions that are relevant to your particular company and your particular requirements. But thank you very much for attending. And Ryan, any last words?
I just want to thank Cloud Comrade for the opportunity to present. You know, it's great working with you, and I'm looking forward to getting over to Singapore sometime soon.
Right, awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.